Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we explore the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of Out of Frame, a video essay series on YouTube. Here today, back for the first time in 2 weeks, I guess, is Jen Monfessanti, director of communications at the Libertas Institute, and of course, Paul Nelson, who is senior marketing manager and head of social media at FEE. Paul, Jen, how are you guys doing?
Hanging in there. Sorry I missed last week.
Yeah,
Sounded like a
you
hoot.
missed out. Everything everywhere all at once. Fantastic. Also, dear listener, if you did not listen to that podcast, you should go back and listen to it because Paul and I extolled the virtues of that film, Everything Everywhere, and it was amazing, and you should watch it. I woke up, well, not woke up this morning because I don't wake up in my studio, but I got to the studio this morning and discovered a scorpion on the floor walking around, which is the first time. And then I sent a picture to my wife and she was like, "What? I did not realize scorpions even lived in Georgia," which I did realize that, but I've never seen one in Georgia until today.
I have. I've seen more scorpions in Georgia and Alabama than I have in Utah so far.
I mean, I suppose that makes sense. Utah's a little cold, I feel like. Sometimes.
Too cold, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they're there, but I'm just saying there's probably a time limit in the year when you might find them.
Probably. It's still pretty chilly outside as far as weather is concerned. We don't actually get proper warm weather until like summer. And then it gets very hot, but then...
I'm pretty sure the scorpion I saw is called a southern devil scorpion. So that's sounds terrifying, although they're not particularly venomous. They're just, regular venomous, like wasp level venomous. So,
well, that's
I
fun.
don't know. It's super fun. I don't know. I'm very torn on all of this because I don't really want to walk into my studio and then find a scorpion, and I also don't really want just to be sitting here barefoot or whatever and have a scorpion like stab me, which really wouldn't be enjoyable. On the other hand, my studio, because it is a converted garage, we have a long way to go before we've really shored up all of its various I don't know, sort of
scorpion defenses.
It's scorpion defenses, let's say. Yeah, I mean it's like it's got a lot of holes. Like the windows aren't very well sealed. Like the big garage doors still have gaps that anything could get through. I mean, and so that stuff is like kind of an ongoing process for us, and we're trying to figure it out. But like now, I feel like a little bit more urgency has been applied to this problem because I mean before it was mostly like I'm losing heat or air conditioning when we're just through all these gaps. And then sometimes we're getting water seeping in from the garage doors, which is like not great, but fine because it's not very much. Now my problem is I got to get centipedes and scorpions out of here. And that seems like a bigger problem to me.
I would say so, personally.
Anyway, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But I'm also a little tired because we had to do a very late showing of the movie that we were going to talk about today. But I'm glad that I went. I do kind of wish we were still in the mode where I could have watched it on the Max at home, for example. But, went to the theater, saw The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, starring Nicolas Cage as himself, or as at least two very heightened versions of himself, let's call it. Man. Oh, also, did you guys, I don't know if you guys noticed it. So in this movie, like Nic Cage, modern day Nic Cage, 50 whatever year old actor Nic Cage, talks to himself as Nicky Cage. And I don't know if you guys noticed in the credits, he was Nicholas Coppola in the credits. I did notice was credited as a Coppola, which was funny because otherwise
I laughed out loud as I was walking out of that theater.
Yeah, there were pretty good moments. So anyway, this is a very weird movie in a lot of ways. It's basically it's a comedy that's Nicolas Cage kind of playing himself in kind of a, I don't know. Do we think he's like is he more washed up than he is in reality in here? Like he's got some cultural cachet now anyway, but like a lot of it was about him sort of his fall from grace as a movie star and then being sort of relegated. And this is all in the trailer, like being relegated to essentially doing a birthday party for a really rich guy in Spain. And, and when he doesn't get a part that he wanted to get. And it turns out that this guy might be some kind of international criminal, and the CIA gets involved. And of course, Tiffany Haddish is playing a CIA agent, which is bizarre. Ike Bernholtz oh, by the way, I want to talk about the CIA in this movie as well, because the CIA is the most useless organization on the face of the earth, apparently, which I am inclined to agree with. But this movie does not make the CIA look competent in any way. Yeah, boy, what a bizarre premise. And to try to get this with Nicolas Cage and actually get him to participate in it is insane. And it kind of works for me. So I don't know, Paul, what were your like initial reactions here?
Well, we're back to back after the absolute disaster that Dumbledore movie was. That made me question my love for movies. The last 2 weeks have reignited my love for cinema, and for very different reasons. This movie was refreshing. It's a breath of fresh air. It's a very simple story with some twists, but it's just two dudes in the end, becoming friends in an unlikely scenario, and hilarity ensues. And it's fantastic. I mean, Nic Cage. He's playing himself, maybe dialed up, but it's just absolutely hilarious. It is smart in all the right ways, and we do actually have something to talk about. This is with the out of frame ethos of using movies to talk about bigger ideas, and the CIA. Wow. I mean,
wow.
They made the matter worse in multiple ways. Every
possible way they could have.
At every single turn.
Yes.
Genuinely.
I like in this movie, we'll probably get into more of this once we get to spoilers, but I like that like Ike Bernholtz's character is like sort of half being like, oh, this is a terrible idea. Don't tell him this stuff that Tiffany Haddish is telling Nic Cage to do. And it's all the worst advice that you could ever give anybody in context. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And yet the most that we get in response is like, oh, this is a bad idea. We're going to lose our job. Yeah, you should lose your jobs. It's the worst plans imaginable. And yet, untrained, unplanned, like bad intelligence, just the whole way down. Anyway, Jen, what were your initial thoughts?
I came of age in the 90s, and I thought that I understood what peak Nicolas Cage meant. Okay. I was a teenager when we're talking about Gone in 60 Seconds, The Rock, Face Off, even Captain Corelli's Mandolin. Okay. I've seen all of these.
I've never seen Captain Corelli's Mandolin, by the way.
Really?
No. And that one came up a lot in this movie.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to agree with character Nic Cage and say that it's underrated. But yeah, I thought I understood peak Nicolas Cage. I was wrong.
Have we reached peak Nicolas Cage?
I don't know that it's
Are
possible.
we still building up to peak Nicolas Cage?
We might be, because this is the Nic Cageiest Nic Cage movie I've ever seen in my life.
I'm genuinely curious about this because, so this movie was about as meta of a movie as you could possibly create.
Yes, it was.
And it works and Nicolas Cage is like one of the most fascinating actors you could imagine because, he had massive A-list stardom. He has an Oscar, for goodness sakes. And then today he's like the guy who does Mandy and Pig and like weird horror movies and Color Out of Space and stuff that's just bonkers. I mean, Willy's Wonderlands, and I've seen all those movies, and
he had a small part in Snowden as well.
Oh yeah, and Snowden, he was great in Snowden, actually. Yeah. But that I feel like little cameo bits and things like that. But like we have phases of Nic Cage, because you've got 90s The Rock, wild action movie Nic Cage. You've got like National Treasure Nic Cage, which is kind of a different era. It's like post-rock, still movie star, but now it's like I don't know, it's just different. It's like Brendan Fraser going from like hunk to like kind of a fun adventure movie, Mummy, stuff like that.
He was still a hunk in the Mummy.
He was still a hunk. You're right. Maybe I'm it's too early to talk about a shift in Brendan Fraser, but in any case, then now he's like insane Nic Cage, and all you can think of is like wild choices and insane performances. And this movie merges all of those things simultaneously.
Yep.
And so we get like multiple layers of Nic Cage all at once in this movie. And I'm still like trying to process it a little bit. Like I'm trying to figure out.
It's a whole lot. And then also combined with the fact that this film itself uses one of my favorite sort of filmmaking tropes, which is everybody needs to adjust to the new genre like real fast. Because we start out with one kind of movie, an adult character-driven drama, right? Lots of dialogue. It's all about the relationships, and then it shifts to like this crazy
a weird action blockbuster, right?
International crime blockbuster thing, and everybody's got to adjust like real fast to the new genre.
Now we're talking about marketing and the hook.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
and it's just
the movie literally tells you what the movie is about to do in the movie.
Yes, and it's so wild to me that this movie works on any level. I can't even imagine the pitch meeting that happened in order to get this film made.
I'm excited about the pitch meeting, like the Screen Rant pitch meeting that we're going to get as a result of this movie.
Yes, I am very much looking forward to that. But like, this movie was just entertaining to me on about every single level. It was fantastic. And it had no business working as well as it did. But it worked really, really well. And we've been talking about Nic Cage a lot, but Pedro Pascal was amazing in this movie. Yeah. And the ending was just great. I'm not going to give it away right now because we're still not in the spoiler section, but the ending was fantastic. So
I will say, I actually felt like, so the actual ending, yes, I did feel like there was a very abrupt shift that got us into like, or out of the meta component of it. I don't know. I don't know where we are.
Back into the framing.
Back into the initial framing device. Sure. I don't know. Anyway, who knows? But yeah, man, we laughed a ton. It was tremendously funny. I thought Nic Cage was fantastic. You're right. Pedro Pascal was really, really, really good and worked very well. I don't know, Paul, what do you have to say before we get into spoilers? Because there's some things I want to talk about that are like very plot spoiler.
Right. Yeah. Really heavy. For me, this was, as Jen said, the Nic Cageiest movie ever. And on paper, to me, I feel like the idea sells itself. We get Nic Cage to play himself, and he's down on his luck because he has terrible spending habits. He's a terrible father. He's just the absolute worst. And he's an alcoholic, and we ship him overseas to some millionaire. And could he be a drug kingpin? Arms dealer?
Yeah.
Maybe. Who knows? But they strike up a friendship, and the CIA gets involved.
And then the CIA gets involved.
I mean, the marketing is great. I know this isn't doing that well at the box office, which is kind of surprising to me. I think it's kind of it's been there's a lot of good movies out right now, surprisingly.
Yeah.
I mean, even like the big block, like Sonic 2 is good. I mean, like,
yeah.
So it's hard. I think we're at a point where, it's, to me, you look at the numbers, it's a little disappointing, but
yeah,
I think if this came out a couple months ago, it would do a lot better.
I think so. I think there is some box office competition here where there wasn't before. And also I got to note that Everything Everywhere All at Once seems to be like improving in box office week over week. And I think that speaks to really, really strong word of mouth on that one. Obviously, like, it's competing against Sonic and it's competing against Dumbledore and it's, all those things. But at the same time, I will say, like, I do feel like this is the kind of movie, because it is kind of a broad comedy to a large extent. I mean, yes, there are some action pieces and things like that, but it's not really an action movie. It's not really like a big spectacle movie. Exactly. I mean, it is an adult character drama. At least at first, right? And it's meant to be that. And it's very, very funny even at the very beginning. But I would probably be happy watching that VOD. Like, I really would have been happy to be able to put that on a big screen at home and just watch it at home. And I would have laughed just as much. And also I was in a theater because it was Sunday night at 10 o'clock p.m. We were there by ourselves. So, like, the viewing experience really wasn't tremendously different from what I would have had at home anyway. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, The Northman's not doing super well at the box office either, but that one I at least understand a little bit more because, Alexander Skarsgård isn't exactly like a huge box office draw, and The Northman just actor. And it's just a very like dark, violent movie that not that many people are probably going to go see. This movie is like Nic Cage just being Nic Cage, and I would think that everybody would. Yeah. I don't know.
They did talk about marketing, and I feel like the marketing's been a little bit off. Just the name itself is
the name's not helping it for sure.
It doesn't like what it's hard.
This is like an A24 kind of name. Yeah. Like it's not a big comedy sort of name, and I don't quite get why they made that choice, because I do feel like it's the kind of thing that like your marketing team, at the studio I just feel like you would have looked at it and said, oh no, we can't. At Lionsgate, we can't do that. We got to have something that's going to be, a lot funnier than this, or a lot quippier, or, some kind of double entendre or something like that. But I don't know. I mean, it was fine for me, but we see everything, so it doesn't really, it's not really the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, let's get into spoilers, because I want to talk about the CIA stuff, and I want to talk about like the twist in all of this. And so I'll start by saying, like, it's a comedy. I mean, when you put Tiffany Haddish as a CIA agent and Baron Holtz as a CIA agent, like, like it's not meant to be a very serious version of the agency, right? Like, this is not anything. So fine, except for they are wrong about literally everything. Their intelligence about who's running they believe that Pedro Pascal's character is an arms dealer, and they are wrong about that. They believe that Nicolas Cage they immediately involve Nicolas Cage in this plot because they think somebody else is going to get off the private jet that he's on, and Nicolas Cage steps out instead. So they're wrong about who's on the private jet, which that one's insane because private jets have manifests that they could look at.
Yeah.
So, that's crazy. They give him the worst possible advice. He ends up getting roped into sneaking into a room, like a locked room in Pedro Pascal's mansion. And he ends up, they give him some kind of like touch sensitive, like knockout poison, and he touches himself with it, which classic slapstick moment there. But then she gives him the advice to go out the window when he literally has 30 seconds to stay conscious, and it's like, here, go out on the ledge of the window and go into the other room why would you give that advice? I mean, it somehow worked because the movie had to happen, but like Ike Barinholtz the whole time is saying like, oh, we're going to kill Nicolas Cage didn't die. He should have died. It was way more than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for any of that. It didn't make any sense. granted, they did use it to make sort of a punchline for Tiffany Haddish, like waking him up, which was kind of funny. But man, every bit of their advice was bad. And then they eventually got captured themselves and tried to get him to come to a trap. Like, it's the worst agency that's ever existed.
So they're very incompetent, but also I think the thing that was most egregious to me is how they recruited Nic Cage to help them. They basically played on every emotional string they could to a father. It's like, this girl is the same age as your daughter. What if your daughter was found in a ditch? And
so let's back up real quick. Let's back up real quick. There is a little news clip when Nic Cage is on the plane that gives us a little clue into this, whatever. So there's in Spain, the I guess it's Catalonia, I think they said. Mm-hmm. The president of Catalonia is the drug or the arms dealer and the cartels and stuff want him out, and they want whatever.
They want the incumbent to stay, and this
right. They want the incumbent to stay, but they want right. So the U.S. government is like backing. Yeah, so the U.S. government's like backing the challenger and whatever. And so like they had kidnapped this guy's daughter in order to get him to drop out of the race so that he won't, so that the cartel can stay in power and whatnot. And that's all fine and whatever. And then, we're led to believe that Pedro Pascal's the one who's got, this girl kidnapped. And so Nicolas Cage's mission from the CIA standpoint is to like go find the girl and then get the intelligence that they need to move in and rescue this girl so that they can, get this election that they're trying to manipulate back on track and whatnot. Fine. But they're playing on Nic Cage's sort of family issues because he's divorced and his relationship with his daughter is, not great. And, and he feels bad about it, but he's also clearly a narcissist. So he's really struggling to like get out of his own head and get out of his own way to like have a relationship with his daughter. And the CIA is just gross, but also they're terrible at everything. Like they're just bad at their job.
Yeah.
Just funny. Yeah. I mean, although I made this point before, and I think that this is something that I will say, and this is more of a personal opinion thing. I know a lot of people who are like really believe that CIA has like a lot of power that I don't actually believe the CIA has. I fully believe, because we got plenty of declassified documents and stuff to demonstrate that CIA has spent a lot of time over a lot of years trying to manipulate different countries' governments, elections, tried to foment coups and overthrow people. And that's all true. What I don't believe, and what people I would call actually legitimately conspiracy theorists, where I think they go wrong a lot of times, is assuming competence and success on the part of the CIA that I don't think the CIA's track record actually demonstrates. Because, for example, like people talk about Cuba all the time and how much, and of course, like the Castro regime has used the CIA as a scapegoat for years and years and years. But I would like to point out that the Castro regime is still in power in Cuba. And they've been in power in Cuba for 60 years, and it's not changed at all. And so, like, whatever the CIA has attempted to do, or whatever they've tried to do as far as, like, sparking revolutions and overthrows and coups and blah, 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 it hasn't worked. And the same thing was true in Venezuela, where, Hugo Chavez used to say that he was this horrible target of the CIA and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Hugo Chavez was in power for, 10 years before Maduro took over. We're into like somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 years of the same basic regime. It's not changed at all. And prior to that, the regimes were pretty bad too. Like there just weren't really any version of this. And of course, we're also not factoring in that there are other countries in the world, Russia, China, etc., that have their own versions of the CIA trying to manipulate people's elections and prop up their preferred, presidents and dictators and whatnot. So I don't know. One of the things I like about this movie is just that like the CIA is like a bunch of bumbling idiots. And I kind of feel like that's true in reality. Way more than most people would like to believe, like pro and anti-CIA people. I think both of them over assume our CIA's competence. And
well, that's what makes good comedy, is that everything has a little kernel of truth to it, even though it might be outlandish. And I mean, yelling Nicolas Cage movies back and forth over a secure, quote unquote, secure line. But I mean, the emotional manipulation, I mean, it happens all the time, not just CIA, but just our police here in America.
Yep.
I mean, I think one of the most famous recent examples, and this happens all the time, was Breonna Taylor's boyfriend was pressured with all kinds of stuff to testify certain ways or admit different things. And so it's not like this is just made up out of thin air. But that's what makes this movie, I think, so good, is that my perception of Nic Cage is that it's exactly what they set him up to be in the beginning of the movie. Anything else would surprise me, frankly. And the CIA, I mean, it's just all across the board.
You're totally right about that. But if Nic Cage in this movie was like behind the scenes, like if he was presented as a totally normal guy with, good family life and all the stuff about spending habits and everything else being kind of rumor. Oh no, that's not true. Mm-hmm. Whatever. You'd be like, well, that doesn't track at all. Like that doesn't make any sense. The thing is, I've never told this story on the podcast before, but I've probably told this story to you guys before. But I was at South by Southwest a few years ago, and Nicolas Cage did a keynote there, and it was jam packed, man. It was like one of the biggest audiences I've ever been around at a convention like that. And those are huge, huge halls, 5,000 seat halls and stuff. And so there's a massive number of people there. There's overflow into the hall. Like everybody wanted to see Nic Cage, including me. And I was there. And at first of all, he was really interesting and weird and the whole thing. Like he was exactly the Nic Cage that you expected him to be the entire time. As far as I can tell, the Nic Cage that you imagine is exactly the Nic Cage that exists. Like, I don't think Nic Cage is actually capable, which I actually think is a good thing for people in general. I don't think he's capable of being a different person when he's just being himself. Like, I don't think he has like a public persona and a private persona that are like radically at odds. He's not like this Ellen DeGeneres kind of character that's like, oh, I'm dancing and fun. And then you talk to their staff and they're like nightmares to work with and blah, blah, blah. Like he's exactly the guy that you expect. And at the end in the Q&A, a girl got up and said, just gushing about being there for Nic Cage. And, oh my God, I didn't realize you were going to be here. And so I missed my flight to stay here and see you speak. And literally seconds later, Nic Cage says, he literally looks at the girl and he says, that is so kind of you. And I'm so thankful. You didn't have to do that. Hey. And then he calls over his assistant. And he's like, let's buy this woman a new flight, and paid for her airfare to change her flight, which was her choice. It was her choice to skip the flight and lose the money or whatever. And Nic Cage bought her another flight. But it's like stuff like that. You just go, man, if he does this everywhere he goes, right? Like if every time he goes and does a Comic-Con or he does a convention somewhere, or every time somebody just comes up to him on the street and says, oh my God, I loved you in Moonstruck, my favorite actor in the world, Raising Arizona was my favorite movie. And he's like, let me buy you a car. like, of course, Nic Cage is going to be left with millions and millions of dollars worth of spending problems and debt and things where he's going to need to take the occasional rich guy birthday party,
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, it's just funny to me, but yeah, I mean, a lot of that felt really, really real. And then obviously another CIA twist is that they think they know in the compound where the girl is going to be. And of course it is a secret room, but it's a secret room because Pedro Pascal's character has a Nicolas Cage shrine that he's built up with, really good. I mean, he's got the sarin gas beads from The Rock. He's got, he's got stuff from Con Air. He's got like the teddy bear from Con Air. I mean, like,
yep,
it's amazing. And then also like the moment, and that's like a trailer moment too, of Nic Cage like seeing the wax sculpture or whatever of himself holding the guns and going like, that is grotesque. That's the worst thing I've ever seen. I'll give you $20,000 for it. Just like, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, all that stuff worked really well for me. And I think at the core of it, it's really just a buddy comedy with the two of them sort of falling in love with each other. And with just Pedro Pascal and Nic Cage just finding in each other just the best friendship imaginable. And all of that, I don't know, it just works. And there's no, like, that's something that's going to apply years from now. Like, you're not going to go back on this like 5 years from now and go like, oh, that doesn't hold up. You're going to be like, no, there's good stuff here. So I don't know. What are your like sort of, I don't know about final thoughts or anything, but like, just, wrap this up for us a little bit.
This movie, for all that it is extremely Nic Cage, and so there's some adult language and heavy drinking and light drug use and all of that good stuff in this movie, it is shockingly wholesome. At its core, it is about the power of friendship and the importance of family and how important those relationships actually are to making us whole and healthy human people. And that was just outstanding to me. It was a hoot to watch. And then the closing, the ending, just really put a bow on it. It's just the importance of friendship and family, and it was wonderful and shockingly sweet. And I loved this movie.
Paddington 2.
John.
Paddington 2. I want to talk about this. There's a scene, speaking of this, wholesome, about friendship and family. This is maybe my favorite part of this movie is this discussion between Nic Cage and Pedro Pascal about what their favorite movies are. And Pedro's like, they're like several drinks in at this point, and he's a little reticent to tell him his third favorite movie. And he finally says, third favorite movie is Paddington 2. And Nic Cage is like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I can't believe you. What are you talking about? And he said, I cried through the entire thing. And it's just the most lovely movie I've ever seen. And then, of course, they watch it and they cry through the whole thing. And I'm here to tell you, Paddington 2 is fantastic, as is Paddington 1. Highly recommend both of those movies. And if you want a movie that is also about friendship and family, and it's just the most wholesome movie ever and completely non-cynical movie. I just love that was the reference point for them. It was like a beautiful, completely non-cynical film. It's just Paddington 2. It is. It absolutely is. And I walked out of the theater and I turned to Marion and I was like, I second that. Like, I agree. I don't know if it's number one favorite movie, but it's up there. It's pretty good. But yeah, it is a really wholesome movie. I mean, yeah, there's some language and stuff, but like, I don't know. I mean, I would certainly show this to kids as young as, in the 13, 14-year-old range. I think that'd be fine for me. I don't know, Paul, you may have a different perspective. You think that's too young?
No, they're doing LSD. I mean,
well, fair enough.
The cursing, yeah, whatever. But I mean, you got to have some, maybe a few more years after that. And I don't think it would also hit for kids.
Well, I don't think they would get it is the bigger problem.
Yeah.
But I would be fine from a message standpoint. I would generally be fine.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I also think you need to be kind of our age to really appreciate this movie to some extent, because I think you have to have grown up with various phases of Nic Cage. If you only knew Nic Cage from the insane stuff that he does today, I don't think you're going to really appreciate what this is. But if you're in your 30s or in your 40s in particular, probably 40s would even be better, because you've seen Nic Cage from like Raising Arizona and Moonstruck all the way to now, right? If you've seen just the radical shifts and progression of that man's career, and there's something to appreciate in every phase of that too, I think. Like there's always something interesting that is happening. But he just makes off the wall choices, and they're just bizarre choices in many cases. And he even talked about in the movie, he talked about this like nouveau shamanic. That's a real thing that he talks about. Like that's his own sort of concoction of whatever acting style he has. That's the label he actually personally uses for it. I don't know what it is, man. It's weird. It's super weird. But like he is his own individual, and I don't know. It's kind of fun. So let me ask this question to everybody. Do you guys think that this is the beginning of like a resurgence of Nic Cage as like an A-list? Because he's doing talk shows now. He hasn't done talk shows in like 15 years. And he's doing the talk show circuit for this movie. Like, do you think this is like Nicolas Cage coming back to like The Rock? Or do you think this is just another weird moment along the current run?
I don't know. But all I know is that I want more Nic Cage movies, whatever those movies happen to be, because they all have something to recommend them. Like, they're all really weird in their own way. Maybe not like Wicker Man weird, but still, like, they're all uniquely Nic Cage movies. And I am just here for that.
Wicker Man was referenced.
Yes, it was.
Wait, did they reference? Was I paying
not
attention?
The bees.
He didn't want a bee belt buckle. Not the bees.
I totally glossed over that when he said that. Yes, obviously.
I was one of the few people laughing in the theater because I think it was that quick.
Yeah.
But
they're wrapping it up at that moment too. So it's like I'm just thinking about the family moment and stuff. And then he's got like a tarantula belt buckle that she wants, and it's like not the beast. I didn't catch that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if this is a resurgence to the Rock version of Nicolas Cage. I
don't know if he could, but
right, and I don't know if he should. Because he's past that point, he's more on the side of Sean Connery as far as age goes. But
that's true.
It works in this case because they made it. They wrote it so it would work, and he didn't need to be doing crazy stuff besides acting ridiculous.
Threw a couple punches.
He threw a few, yeah, and his training obviously paid off. But
ran around in a pair of loafers.
Yeah,
I like
ankle support.
I like the whole scene. By the way, bad ankle support. I like the whole scene where he's talking about how his instincts as an actor are better than the CIA's.
He can read people.
People. He wasn't wrong, though.
He was right.
He wasn't actually wrong in this case.
But what I appreciate about this movie is that it is kind of a throwback to what Hollywood used to make when movies were more interesting but still fun.
Yeah.
They just don't make them like this, like they used to. And I know that sounds pretty like it's like, oh, it's kind of all right, boomer. But it is. It's just an action movie that's fun and has an interesting premise.
I think that there's a sort of a running theme on this show in general, where when we find a movie like that, I mean, we've talked about, endlessly, we talked about Everything Everywhere, but like stuff like Fat Man or whatever, which we recommended, like, I think consistently when three of us really like a movie, like all three of us really like a movie, it tends to be something in that vein, which is like super unique and super interesting, often funny, but also something that does not have the kind of, it's just really off the wall for what we're used to seeing today and what we're probably used to seeing for the last 10 or 15 years, which in the realm of comedy, I mean, a lot of the comedy is like ultra political, or it's like, it's message driven and stuff. Like you think about all the Adam McKay stuff, it's a lot of that Don't Look Up and those kinds of things. Or it's the Paul Feig kind of stuff, where it's like a big cast of improvisers who aren't really doing anything. There's no plot. And it's another thing in this movie too. We need a plot to drive the movie forward. Yes, you do. I hate
Can't just
comedies
talk to each other.
Where they just talk to each other all the time. That's a direct dig at the Paul Feig style of comedy making, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we just got people in a room and we're going to put a wide camera on them and we're just going to let them riff until something funny comes out, regardless of whether or not it has anything to do with anything, you know? And so I think those two schools have been dominant for the last 15 years. And frankly, I don't really need my movies to be preachy. And a lot of the Adam McKay stuff tends to be kind of preachy. And a lot of the Paul Feig stuff tends to be really just bad storytelling. Like, and that's the stuff to me that doesn't hold up either. Like if I go back and watch like Bridesmaids or, you know, like any of those, I mean, granted stuff like Ghostbusters 2016 was DOA, but like, there's a lot of things you can go back and watch. And I just don't find it funny because the references don't land anymore. There's no context. There's no actual story. So once you've been through the first viewing and you've gotten all of the chuckles that you can wring out of surprise, it's no longer surprise. And there's nothing backing up the story that makes it funny in a context that would be funny again, another viewing, you know? And that's where I think things like Edgar Wright's movies are like, they're always so good because I could go back and watch Shaun of the Dead. I watched Shaun of the Dead, 20 times. And every time I watch that movie, it's funny because the entire thing is constructed in a way that is a funny story.
Absolutely. Hot Fuzz still is one of my favorite movies just ever.
All the time. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and also they're the ones that we meme too. If you notice, like when we're in our Slack conversations, like when we put in memes, we were just doing Hot Fuzz memes the other day. And like, there's a bunch of them that you can draw on. And there's just not a lot from a lot of these other films sometimes. So I don't know. Look, I don't know where this is going to go, but I do hope to see more movies in this vein. I don't know how. Actually, let me ask another question, you guys, before we wrap this section of this up. Could another actor have done this role? Could you imagine swapping Nic Cage for anyone else? I mean, obviously you have to rewrite it for their specifics, but like,
I think I was actually thinking about this when we were talking during the podcast, and I don't know if it would necessarily work because Nic Cage was an action star. So you'd have to have an action star, but somebody that is just kind of, there's very few and far between. I think back in the day,
work with like a Liam Neeson, for example.
I don't because you'd have to change the premise because the reason why Nic Cage goes there is because he's an absolute loser, and there's not too many people that have a public persona of being an absolute loser that are big in Hollywood.
Yeah, I don't think you could have. I mean, I don't think you could have had that character be anyone other than Nic Cage. Whether or not anyone else could have played that character, Nic Cage, is the different story.
Personally, I don't think you can do this movie if you don't get Nic Cage to play himself.
Exactly. I wouldn't have wanted to watch anybody else play Nic Cage.
No, I would not have gone to see this movie or been interested in this movie at all if it was someone else pretending to be Nic Cage. That would not have worked for me. In a similar, just as a random sort of poll, I feel like it would be like if you did Michel Gondry's, being John Malkovich, for example. Not Michel Gondry. I'm sorry, he did Science of Sleep, but who did? I'm trying to remember who did John Malkovich.
I'd have to look it up.
It'll come to me at some point. But anyway, if you did Being John Malkovich and then you didn't actually have John Malkovich when they're actually going into like his brain and stuff, like if it wasn't actually him, like that whole conceit, like really, yeah, Charlie Kaufman. Thank you. Charlie Kaufman's movie. But like that conceit wouldn't work if you didn't actually get John Malkovich to play John Malkovich. Like you can't do that as that kind of thing. And I think that this is kind of the same. Liam Neeson, I would go to bat for to some extent because he doesn't have the same type of loser persona, but he does have a string of movies that he has done that are all the same garbage action movies. The one area where I think Liam Neeson would be a lot worse of a choice, though, is that he doesn't have the range. He's done really serious dramas, And early in his career, Oscar winner, Schindler's List, like all of these like really dramatic films. And now he's just been doing one thing over and over and over again. Nic Cage keeps doing different stuff. Like, from Pig to, like Willy's Wonderland to Gone in 60 Seconds type of stuff to Next to, Bangkok Dangerous, like all these things, like he plays detectives and blue collar people and farmers and regular dads and screenwriters. And I feel like every character that Liam Neeson has played for the last like 10 years has been a former SAS or former Army Ranger who's now retired, and people, take his daughter and he needs to use his skills to get his daughter back.
Yeah.
Or somebody else's daughter or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I think this exercise.
I don't know. It's very. Yeah.
I think this exercise kind of shows that the death of the action star, and that's been talked about before, but there just isn't really anybody. The only people I could think that I would be interested in, maybe like a Pierce Brosnan, because he hasn't really done anything, but he played that role as James Bond. And I think he's kind of funny, but also, like, here's the problem: Chris Pratt and Chris Hemsworth, they're too young. They just wouldn't.
Too young. Yeah.
Tom Cruise, if he'd have gone for it, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
Look, I could. So, but again, it would have to be a completely different movie, right? Because Tom Cruise.
Yes, absolutely.
Tom Cruise has never had a down, like, period.
No, not really.
Like, he's never had a period where you go like, what the heck is Tom Cruise thinking? Why is he making all of these like $2 million random horror movies? Like, what's going on, Tom Cruise? Like, did you lose it all in the divorce? Like, what's the deal? And so like Tom Cruise,
a question like that.
Except for, you're right. Like, I would love to see a movie where Tom Cruise plays himself and just like, and is willing to make fun of the insanity that it is to be Tom Cruise, or to be around Tom Cruise or meet Tom Cruise. Right. But not as a cameo. 'Cause we get that in movies all the time, right? Like, you get like Mike Tyson in, geez, help me out.
The Hangover?
The Hangover, yeah. I don't know why I was blanking on that. But like Mike Tyson in The Hangover is a good example where it's like, okay, we always get little cameos where like actors play themselves, and that's fine. But like a whole movie where Tom Cruise plays Tom Cruise, wild.
I just thought of another name that, given current events, would be fascinating. Will Smith. Actually, you're right.
See? I mean, I think there's an interesting point there because but again, he hasn't really had a down period.
What are you talking about? We're in it. I mean, I know he just won Best Actor.
We're in it. We're in it, except for like we'll see, first of all, but it's too early. Like, we don't have years of Will Smith playing, like, showing up in movies randomly as like, like he's not in like low grade. I mean, we'll see. Maybe he will be, right? But problem with Will Smith now, he's got all the money in the world, and I don't think Will Smith has like horrible spending problems. At least it doesn't appear to be the case. So I feel like Will Smith, no matter what happens in the next couple of years, could live off of his nearly $1 billion or whatever it is, $500 million he's got. That that's gonna be fine. He's gonna be fine.
I mean, he's one of the few people though that I would actually put like in the range of Nic Cage as far as acting ability. There's not a lot of people.
I kind of agree.
He's up there.
And you're also right that like Will Smith he's done dramas and won Oscars for said dramas, been Oscar nominated before. And then of course this year, big action star, one of the biggest action stars who's ever lived. And also done some. Oh yeah. Huge music star, television star. Plus, like, he's done some kind of weirder movies that you won't think about. Legend of Bagger Vance, stuff like that. But man, what I need from Will Smith though is for him to have if he had a period of his career where instead of Kid and Play doing House Party, it was like Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff's House Party, then that's the missing piece for me. Like, I want to see that version of it. I don't know. Anyway, let's wrap this piece up. We got some bonus pod to get into in a little bit. If you're a supporter of the show on Patreon or Subscribestar, stick around. Well, stick around. We've got separate episodes for you now, but you'll have a bonus episode. We're going to be talking about the Ministry of Truth here in a little bit. And so if you're interested in joining us for that conversation, please feel free to go to subscribestar.com/outoframeshow or patreon.com/outoframeshow and, give us $1 a month or whatever. You get access to Discord and get access to bonus pods and all that kind of stuff. But just before we go, let's do our star ratings. What are you going to star the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent? Paul.
A star is a great movie. If you can go see it in theaters, go see it in theaters. It's worth the $10 to $15, maybe $5 if you go on a Tuesday. And I know there's a lot of theaters that do that. Definitely worth that. But it's fun. And I was in my showing, the audience was great. They were really into it. And I heard, I don't really hear this too often when I go to theaters from other people, but people were actually talking about the movie as they left the theater and saying some glowing praise. And that's kind of stuck with me because, like I said, it just never happens. People are pretty shuffle out and head on to the bathroom. But no, everyone was pretty loved it.
Nice. Jen?
Yeah, full star. This was just a delight. Please go watch it. And if you can't go watch it, stream it later. It's fine. But seriously, watch this film. It's a good time. Full star.
Same for me, full star. I'm more on the stream it side of things. I think the minute that it's available to you, go for it. Although I'll make a case for going to see it in the theater just because I'd like to see more movies get made like this. And so we need people to go and support these things when they come out and when they're good, that hopefully sends a signal to these companies to do more of this kind of stuff. So yeah, give it your support. But anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Behind the Scenes. We would love for you to join us next week. Check out our previous episodes. And if you haven't, you're not familiar with Out of Frame on YouTube, go check out Out of Frame. Subscribe there. Subscribe on all of our social medias. And we'll see you next time.